Welcome to Tech Talks, Evolving Distribution. I'm Corey Hayes, and with me is Bill Rosado. Today, we're exploring how digital transformation is reshaping the distribution industry.
That's right. From e-commerce platforms to CRM tools, we talk with industry experts about how distribution can embrace these changes and thrive in the ever-changing space.
Whether you're just getting started or looking for new insights, we've got you covered. Today's episode is packed with information to help you navigate the digital shift.
So let the tech talk begin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Tech Talks Evolving Distribution. Corey Hayes, your host, alongside with Bill Rosado, your other host. Bill, how are you doing today?
Doing great, and welcome to the new year.
Yes, welcome to the new year. I was about to say, we don't normally put timestamps on our episodes, videos, because sometimes we just release them in sporadic moments. But yeah, it's a new year. 2026 is fully underway, and hopefully everybody had a good new year, had a good Christmas, and you're getting started off on the right foot in 2026. I know we're trying over here at Aldrich Solutions, and everything's getting going. It's weird. It's a Friday today. It's weird to have the holiday right in the middle of the week, and then kind of get back out of the flow of work. So hopefully you're handling it better than I am.
Yeah, and even worse, right? It's 2 weeks back to back in the middle of the week. Like there's two disruptive weeks. But yeah. I hope all our clients and I hope all our friends out there had a great 2025 and looking forward to 2026 and more success.
Yes, and I think it's worth saying right here from the top, because New Year's Day was right on the Thursday. Obviously, we did not release an episode the Thursday on New Year's Day, but we have an episodes coming out to you soon. January might look a little different, like the second or the fourth Thursday, but we'll get right back to that first and third rotation that you're used to, all of our listeners going into February and then on into 2026. So be sure to look at Tech Talk's YouTube channel when videos get posted. Also, I want to give a shout out. We have a LinkedIn page that is constantly posting and talking about the conversations that we're having with people that come onto the podcast. So if you have not followed us on LinkedIn, go find us on LinkedIn, same name, Tech Talks Evolving Distribution, and be sure to follow that page as well. So we're going to have a conversation today. No special guests. Today's just Bill and I, but we are going to talk about a topic that we hear a lot, whether it's a prospect that we're talking to, whether it's a client that Aldrich is currently working with, something that we constantly see people have headaches over in the past, and something that people are really interested in talking and learning more about how we do is our implementations, implementing new software, implementing new ideas, implementing new solutions. So today we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of the in-betweens when it comes to implementation. Bill, just to get us rolling and just to get the conversation started, why don't you've obviously had some more experience in this industry than I have. So I'm going to kind of use you as a sounding board, and then we'll work through our own experiences with implementation. But why don't you tell me just a little bit about what you've seen and what you've heard out there, and maybe what people are dealing with? Why is this such a big deal?
Well, I think so. This is really the most important part to write any software launch, but specifically for e-commerce, right, is that implementation. We hear all the time, right? What is return on investment? Well, just upfront, a lot of people don't get a good return on investment whenever they have a poor implementation. And we hear horror stories, right? We've brought on clients that they never went live on a platform, where it was a 2-year process. Well, that's 2 years or however long on the one that never went live. There's no return on investment, right? You spent all that time, money, and effort. And then for 2 years, you got nothing back in return. Even some of the success stories that we hear out, right? People get excited because they went in 18 to 12 months. Man, that's still a long time to pay for something, right? And your customers are wanting this, right? You've made the decision to move forward. Your internal, you really want it. The teams really want to see this happen, right? And to spend 12 months on something and still not be live, right? No return for 12 months. Man, how do you go back and explain that to the bean counters, Corey?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know that you can, especially when those that are counting the beans don't really understand the nature of a software implementation in and of itself. It's difficult. You're talking to people that are typically in the role of a C-suite, that are typically more of an analytical person. They like facts and figures, and they expect things to operate based on those facts and figures. So I understand wanting to know the timeline, wanting to know the implementation process, and wanting to know exactly when that ROI, we're going to start seeing those dollars come in, and we're going to start building a case for ROI for the solution that we purchased. So I think that that's the reason that it's such a big conversation. I also think that that's the reason that it's such a big headache for a lot of people, talking about implementing a new software, especially if you're switching software, right? Because that's really the two cases here. You either don't have a solution, or you're getting a solution, or you have a solution that's not working for you and you need a new solution. And typically when it's the latter, when it's that second scenario, you have a solution that's not really a solution and you need a new one. Typically that implementation is really put under a microscope, and that implementation process is really heavily looked at in the prospecting part of, that the whole buying experience and the whole implementing experience. So yeah, I think that that's the reason that it's such a heavy conversation. So maybe getting a little bit more nitty gritty, what are some of the horror stories that you have heard? Like what are people having issues with? Why are they having bad experiences in their implementations? Did I lose you?
Well, a lot of times the horror story, yeah, a lot of times that horror story goes back to the ERP, right?
Mhm.
They've chosen a solution that doesn't really have a great integration. It's a partial integration, not very deep, not very wide, and that's where it comes from, right? They had expectations. Uh, Too often, right? We even see ERPs selling a solution that's supposed to be deeply integrated, and they come to find out,
Yeah.
right, it is very shallow integration. It is not as deep, or it just doesn't have the features and capability of what their needs are for their customers. So, but on the
Mm.
flip side, we've heard, right, and we've heard it on in 2025, right, as we went through these podcasts, one thing really to look at in order to solve that is to find somebody that's really good at implementation, to find somebody that on your team that's going to own it, right? Because the implementation is a horror story, as if there is not somebody that owns it. And two,
Yeah.
if the team is going to buy in. We see all kinds of negatives when a team doesn't buy in to a solution, right? So it doesn't matter how great the solution is. If the implementation and the buy-in isn't there, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've mentioned it several times on this podcast, but given the topic, I think it's worth bringing up again. But when I started at Aldrich Solutions, I actually spent the first 2 years on the implementation team and had firsthand seen the process of these implementations. And you're exactly right. I think it was really amazing to me, um, when I began having conversations with clients that had previous bad experiences in an implementation. I think it was amazing to me to understand and realize just how many providers out there do not have an agenda, do not have a well written out process of what the implementation should look like, something that's repeatable, something that is in itself a process that we understand beginning to end. We know where you're going to be in week 3, as well as we know where you're going to be in week 10. And sometimes I've heard it more than once, but sometimes you see these providers, their implementation just kind of, well, what are we gonna do today? What are we gonna do this week? Well, what do we need? And that's just not really a good, that's not starting off on the right foot. So to those listening, if I could give any advice, when you are in the process of prospecting a new solution, really ask the details that come into an implementation, not just at a high level, not something past just the high level SOW, really understand what that implementation looks like. Ask that provider, where do you see hiccups in the implementation? What do you do well in your implementations? Where do you see implementations go wrong? And what does that process look like on a day-to-day or weekly basis? And then it amazes me still how many people purchase a solution without getting a reference. Have the referral call, talk to that client, and ask them, what was your implementation like? You know they're going to tell you the software works great, the technology works great, we use the technology to do XYZ. Okay, but what was the implementation like when you worked with their personnel, when you worked with their team, when you spoke to a person? What was that experience like? And that's just the first things that come to my mind when I looked at implementations that went wrong for people and the headaches they talked about was that they just did not do enough research before actually buying in and putting their foot forward to roll out the solution.
So, and we've heard this right from a couple different guests on our podcast. It doesn't matter how great the product is and all the whistles and bells that it comes with. If the implementation is poor, then the actual end result in the return on investment is poor. If an implementation is outstanding and the product is just average as far as the solution, the outcome is high, right? That you get great results. So that is a key point that you made there, Corey. Ask about implementation and talk to somebody and ask them how implementation went. If whatever provider it is, right, and whatever the solution is, so not just e-commerce, any type of software implementation, if there isn't a concrete plan of how we're going to get from A to Z, then there's opportunities that are going to happen throughout that process. That's what I've seen in the past.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that when you're choosing partners, when you're choosing software partners, that you really look at their implementation managers and see what it is that they're bringing to the table. In my opinion, I'm not saying that this is, everybody has to do it this way. This is just how Corey did it. But a good implementation manager should be a good coach. They should be, and I liken that because I have a sports background. Not everybody does. But when I think of the best coaches that I had on baseball teams, they were people that seemingly looked into the future and saw what I needed before I did and saw where I was going before I did. You need an implementation manager that knows their process well, that knows their agenda well, and can tell you what's coming around the corner before you even realize it. Somebody that's not afraid to express their opinions and say, this is what I would do, this is how I would handle it, this is how I would approach it, but still gives you the room that you need to make a decision that's best for your company and for your needs, and willing to work with that. Because and this is, again, just my experience, looking back on it, I've been asked a lot, and we'll talk a little bit more about what an Aldrich implementation looks like here and maybe transition here, but I've been asked a lot, when you're implementing a new e-commerce site, what's the best practice when it comes to data? That seems to be the big conversation in our implementations. What's the best practice when rolling out new data, when updating our data, when getting data to the website to make products ready to go to market? And essentially, I found that there's two schools of thought. There's client A, who believes that every single product in their warehouse needs to have a fully fleshed out description with multiple images, maybe even some document links and descriptions thorough on every single product in their warehouse before they go live. And then there's client B, who says, let's focus on the top sellers. Let's focus on whether it's, whatever, how many products you can fit in what you need to. Let's focus on the top 1,500 products that we sell, and let's get those fleshed out. And then let's go live, and then we can worry about the rest down the road. And to reference our past episodes, we have had two particular people use this terminology before. MVP, which stands for minimal viable product. Get your MVPs out the door, and then let's work on the rest later. let's get into the PIM, the product information management system, later, and then let's flesh out our data there. If I were coaching you, if you were in my implementation, Bill, I would say that's exactly what we need to do. That client B is exactly what we need to do. We need to get the information that you care about most up and ready to go. Let's get it live. Let's start seeing ROI come in the door. Let's start seeing that money come in the door. Let's build a case for your ROI, and then let's work on the rest as we go. But specifically, David Key. And if you're interested in this implementation conversation, and you have struggled with implementations in the past and you're looking how to do it better in the future, go listen to that episode with David Key, episode number 14, where he talks about the minimal viable products and how that changed his business. And also Lydia Rice, episode 11, she talked about that as well during implementation. So go back and listen to those key components, and that will help you with your implementation. But I'm kind of rambling on here. That's what I've seen most in implementations, and what people care about. Get that minimal viable product out the door and let it start bringing dollars in.
All right, so let's get deep into Web Alliance e-commerce platform and implementation. Before we get too deep, though, I just want to bring up three things to think about in any software solution, but specifically in e-commerce. Right? There's three different ways you can go. One is to buy a solution that's done for you. Right? Mm-hmm. You hire a company, they build it all out for you. But kind of the challenge with that is they don't know you. They might potentially not really know your ERP. They don't know your business, and they don't know your products, and they really don't know your customers. So that's one path you can, right? It's done for you, or done by you, right? So you do it yourself. So you get a platform out there, and you don't really know the platform. You're learning the platform. You know your products, you know your customers, you know your business, but you don't understand really how this platform works, right? So when there's opportunities and issues, the challenge with that, right, is where do you go to get that? And then who do you hold accountable? Because if somebody internally built it, what happens when they leave you, right? Because they're the one that built it. Or even if that situation where they don't leave you, right? What if the platform that you're using changes things? Who's making sure that it's up to date? Who's making sure it's secure? Who's on that cutting edge, right? And know the bleeding technology, because now you're doing it yourself, but you don't own or understand. There's nobody tied into it. The last option to go for is the option that actually we use on Web Alliance. So before we get kicked off here about Web Alliance and the implementation process, it's done with you, right? So you have somebody that understands your customer, understands the ERP, understands the solution, and they're working with you because you understand your business, you understand your products, you understand internally what the company's wanting to do. So it's done with you, right? To be able to find a solution that's going to work with you to get that MVP, right, Corey? Get that product up and running as quick as possible. I think that is the best approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about those phases, doing it with you. What exactly does that look like? And we'll go through the phases here that we practice to launch a Web Alliance product. So phase one, it really starts off with the integration into your ERP. So kind of go back over what you just said. When you're doing it all by yourself, typically there seems to be integration issues. We've seen that a lot. People that are on like WordPress sites or Shopify sites or something, like they're doing all of the heavy lifting. They're doing all of the integration pieces. There tends to be integration issues. And I think that's really where a good project needs to start, is building that deep level of integration into the ERP to pull data forward, to pull pricing forward, and to make a online environment very suitable to your customers. You need to have a good integration. So phase one is all about focusing on that integration, connecting to your ERP, making sure the data is coming over, making sure that good pricing is coming over. And then in our environment, what we would do is we set you up with what's called a beta site, not to be confused with the sandbox site. And I want to talk about the differences here, because people really care about this, especially your technical people. They will care about how this works. A sandbox site is something that you just go into, you play around. You're not really in a harmful environment because you're not in a live environment, so you're not going to hurt anything. But the problem with the sandbox site is you have to then take that sandbox and duplicate it to a live version. And sometimes when you're copying from sandbox to live, not everything carries over how you experienced it in the sandbox. So what we do is we set up a beta site that can actually be then taken from the DNS to a beta version to a live version. So that way it is literally one for one as far as integration, as far as look, as far as design, as far as experience. Everything that you have come to know and understand through your relationship with that beta site is then mirrored perfectly into the live site. So that's why we utilize beta sites here at Aldrich and on Web Alliance platforms, is so that you understand exactly what your customers will come to experience when it goes to a live version. So that's everything that happens in phase one: integration, beta site, branding, getting your logos, getting your colors, getting your designs, getting your thoughts and inputs on what that exactly should look like. And then, of course, meeting your implementation manager, building a relationship with them. Now, there's one thing I want to ask you about in here, Bill. In phase one is a kickoff. Talk to us a minute. Why is a kickoff so important, and what does it do for the client?
So kickoff is probably the very first start of how's a project going to go, right? I think that really is the test, right? A green light, red light, right? You're wanting a green light kickoff. So the importance of a kickoff is a good kickoff should be you've been working with someone from the sales team or multiple people from the sales team, and maybe you've brought in and you talked to somebody on the back end, right? That's explained some things. So an engineer, software engineer, to kind of to fill in some gaps, right, and answer some questions. But a true kickoff should be the sales team is introducing your team to the team that's going to go ahead and get you up and running on this project. It is the true handoff, right? It is the passing of the baton. So we're going from sales into implementation. Without a great kickoff, the project might start off pretty rocky, right?
Right.
No one has introduced you to the new team. You don't understand what they're going to accomplish. But also in that kickoff, you should learn all the steps, right? The things you talk about, right, Corey? Not the things like deep into the weeds, but at least at a high level, you understand what phase 1, 2, and 3, right? How we're going to go from start to finish, and know that that plan's there. So at least you can have it. So that's why a kickoff is so important.
Yes, receiving direction and setting up good lines of communication. That's what I think of when I think of a good kickoff. Those two things need to happen: receive direction and set up a good line of communication. And what we do here, instead of just sending emails back and forth and everything getting lost into the ether of promos and spams and junk boxes and lost in everything else that you're receiving, what we do is we set you up on a communication base online. We have a project, what's the word I'm looking for? We have project coordinate. Yeah, software platform that centers all of the communication that happens around the project. You could set up different threads. Everything exists within there. Every document we send you exists within there. The product libraries exist. So everything is in one centralized location that is outside of all of the other communications that you're receiving. And the reason that we do that is literally just for organization, just to keep everything in one spot so it's not getting lost with everything else that you're shuffling. And I think that something else that comes to mind when I hear about kickoffs is the question, how much resources are we going to have to contribute to this? How many people are we going to have on a call every single week if we're doing weekly calls? And the beautiful thing about an implementation manager that sees the future is they know exactly when person X and person Y and person Z need to be pulled into the conversation. So that way person X isn't in conversations that don't pertain to them and that they don't have a real interest in. We pull the salespeople in when we need the salespeople in. We need to pull the marketing people in when we need the marketing people. We pull accounting when we need account. That is how the implementation should work, finding the right pieces to fit at the right time. And you should understand that at your kickoff call, who's going to be responsible for what and when. Now, let's talk about phase 2. Bill, do you want to walk us through phase 2?
Well, phase 2 is the real meat right, of the project as far as Web Alliance goes, right? There's a lot of questionnaires to fill out. There's things that
Mhm.
we're going to do. There's things that you as a client are going to do, and it really is that's the meat of getting everything set up. Now, there's still, I think Corey brought up early in phase one, we're talking about data and all that type of stuff. That's still happening behind the scenes. But phase two is putting all those, turning the switches on and off, right? Really setting it up to your business needs, right? Because there's so 20 years experience, right? As far as Web Alliance has been out there for 20 years. There's a lot of different options, and we just need to get the right options for our clients, right? What site A and site B, they might have the back end that's the same, but that phase two is where we're deciding, right, on the front end part, what's going to show up, because on the back end, we need to turn things off, but we need to capture that information from you back to done with you of what it is that we need to turn on and turn off based on a lot of
Yeah.
questionnaires and just those conversations, that weekly call. So we didn't talk about, right, you're going to have a weekly call on Web Alliance with your project coordinator, and they've got a lot of things each week that they know that they need to cover.
Yeah. I tell people in the implementation days, I would tell people all three phases, even though there's three, they don't come in equal phases. They don't come in equal time slots. So a standard implementation is 90 days. That's set for the agenda. That doesn't mean we kick you out at 90 days. You get to stick around, but the agenda is set for 90 days. And phase one is really about 10 of those days. I say phase two is about 60 of the 90 days. We get to phase two pretty quick because Bill is exactly right. It is where the meat exists. And phase two is really when you get introduced to what's called the PIM. Now, let's not get too into the weeds and everything, but essentially what you need to know is the PIM is where the data exists to go to the website. And that way your data is good on your products so that your products can be sold in the market. That is a big component of it. That is probably the largest component of the project. And the reason we want to get to phase two so quick is so that you can spend time getting to what makes you money. We want you to get that ROI. We want you to get that MVP out the door, and then we want you to start making money as soon as you possibly can. So we get to phase two quick. We introduce you to the PIM. We get you trained on the PIM. There's video trainings that are happening on all of this. There's also written documentation about all of this, but you do get hands-on training on all of this. So we give you a plethora of resources to surround you with comfortability and to surround you with confidence around the tools that you're using. So that's really what phase two is. And then we move into phase three after everything is fleshed out to the beta site. The product data is looking good. Phase three is really just a testing environment. So we're putting carts into place. We're putting orders into place. This is a really important part. I would honestly, everything leading up to this, it's all for naught if the tests don't go well. if the thing doesn't do what we want it to do, then it's all bust. So phase three, making sure that as soon as you go live, you're ready to thrive. From the day that you launch, you can accept payments, you can accept orders, you can read invoices, you can get customer specific pricing. That way your customers have a good experience right out the gate, because first impressions matter. If I have a bad experience on a website, it usually doesn't take me but just one or two times going to that website before I say I'm done. So you want to thrive from the word go and provide the best possible experience for your customers from day one. So phase three really is the most important. I have more to say about phase three that I want to get into, but before I do, Bill, is there anything on phase three that you specifically want to talk about?
Well, I think phase three really wraps up all that in phase two, as far as sometimes what you think you want it to do isn't exactly what
Mhm.
you want it to do, right? So we've turned things on, turned things off. You said you wanted to do this, you wanted to do that. Phase three, we're really getting in. You're like, oh, that is not what I meant, right? I really wanted it to do this, not that. So we're making those tweaks, right? The small things that Corey said, right? That creates a huge difference in that first time that your customer goes to see your brand new website.
Yeah. So what I last thing I want to say about phase three, and then we can wrap this conversation up, is The reason I like phase 3, obviously, is because you start to see the fruits of your labor. You start to see exactly what you've been working towards. But we have a pre-go live checklist that we utilize in our implementations. That checklist is extremely thorough. It has been, like Bill mentioned earlier, fleshed out over 20 years of implementations, 20 years of B2B e-commerce sites. So it's very thorough. And you can actually see, and I love checking things off a list. I don't know about the rest of you, but I love when I have the ability to check things off and say, all right, this is done. But you can actually see where you are, where you should expect to be, and what you need to do in order to have a good, successful go live. And I love that you actually have a physical in your face representation of that checklist that's showing you, all right, I am prepared for this. I am ready for this. We have thought of all of the different avenues, all of the different corners, all of the different components to build a good website, and we can launch in confidence. And that's what I love about that pre-go live checklist, is it builds a lot of confidence into your go live. And I think that our customers have seen that through the experience of their customers. So yeah, implementation. I mean, any other thoughts, any other comments, concerns that you want to express, Bill?
Yeah, so we're talking about 5 steps to go live with Web Alliance e-commerce, and we've talked about the kickoff, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and now we're getting ready to talk about launch, right? But one thing I don't want anybody to miss, it is a 90-day process, right? Web Alliance is e-commerce, takes 90 days to go live. So if you follow through, we're ready to go live, right? If your scenario B, like Corey talked about earlier, getting an MVP product out the door and start getting that return on investment, it is a 90-day process. And you have a project coordinator that's going to work with you and know exactly from week 1 to week 12 what those topics are, right, that we got to cover in order to go live.
And if you're sitting here asking yourself, why are you guys spending so much time talking about this? I promise you want your partners to take implementation seriously, and we do. So that's why we're talking about it today. You want your partners to take implementations very seriously and have a good thought out process. So yes, with everything we've talked about and all of the different components of an implementation, it all comes down to that go live. It all comes down to the big day when you push the button and the whole thing launches. And that's as an implementation manager, that's really the greatest day. But to be honest with you, for the client, that's really when the work begins. That's really when the whole thing starts. So you want it to go good from the beginning, and we want you to have successful businesses out there. So if you have any more questions about implementation, if you have any more questions about specifically e-commerce and implementation, I would encourage you reach out to Bill or I. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can see us on Tech Talks Evolving Distribution. We can see all those messages. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to ask questions, get help, be a part of the conversation, and we would love to talk to you more about it. So, all right, Bill, any final thoughts?
No, I think go back to something Corey said earlier, right? If you really want to get deep into and understanding an MVP approach, go back to episode 14 and 11. Review those episodes if you haven't seen them. If you have seen them, watch them again. I would share this with anybody you think, and it doesn't have to do just with e-commerce, but anybody that's looking to implement some type of software solution. I think a lot of things we talked about as far as Web Alliance and the process for implementation crosses over to other software expectations you should have for other providers. So go ahead and share that. And then, hey, go ahead and subscribe, right? Don't want to miss. This is just some valuable information that we hear from our guests that we have. You need to hear this information, and you need to share this information.
Yeah. All right. Well, now I have to go implement a New Year's resolution and work off all of the Christmas ham that I ate. So I'm in the middle of my own implementation. So, but everybody have a good 2026. Like I said, we've got more episodes coming out. We're not going anywhere. And if you do subscribe, make sure you turn on those alerts notifications so that way you get notified anytime a new episode goes live. Bill, thank you very much. And you have a wonderful rest of your day and have a great 2026.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Tech Talks Evolving Distribution. Thanks for tuning in.
And we hope you've gained some valuable insights on how to embrace digital transformation and stay ahead in the distribution industry.
A special thanks to our sponsor, Aldrich Web Solutions, for supporting this podcast. With over 20 years of experience, they've been helping distributors win online and maximize their digital presence. Be sure to check them out if you're ready to take your business to the next level.
And if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And of course, share this with anyone who could benefit from this conversation.
We'll be back next time with more expert insights. And until then, keep evolving and embracing change.